welcome back everyone. I hope you had a lovely lunch and enjoyed our many food vans and other food offered by ARU. I'm now joined again by Dr. William Campbell and a new and lovely guest, Miss Jemily Rime. Dr. Jemily Rime, sorry. Can't forget the doctor part. Come on, guys. Too much money. I haven't introduced Dr. Jemily yet, but she has recently presented the Creative Digital Dynamics to Symposium in Edinburgh and currently writing a paper based on AI. This chat is regarding AI in the music industry and how it can be used ethically and properly by artists. And so, yeah, you're currently writing a paper about it?
Yes. Most of my research is split into two, and one of the streams of research I look at is artificial intelligence, but new technologies in general and their applications for music production.
Okay, very cool. I'll leave you in the hands of
No, that wasn't you. If you guys could turn the monitor on.
Can you hear me?
I can. Wow.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Wonderful.
Yeah, so thank you for coming. Jemily works in the industry of, somewhat in, you have worked more in industry, but I wanted to ask you a question. So my first question I wanted to ask you is just to get the juices running to begin with, so to speak. So this will help us give us a little bit of background about where you've come from as well. So what is AI in music currently capable of, and what misconceptions do people have about it?
Yeah, that's a very nice question to start with. Usually I start these talks by reminding people that artificial intelligence is an aspirational concept. We have not yet achieved artificial intelligence. It's very much an umbrella word that we use as a shorthand to refer to a bunch of things, usually large statistical models that perform one task really, really well. We don't have models yet that replicate human intelligence in any shape, way, or form, so whenever you see a big tech company advertising now featuring AI, it is very much a marketing term used to define a large group of things that can be considered artificial intelligence. So within that group, you have really specific models. You might have heard neural networks and recursive networks, machine learning in general. All of those are subparts of that kind of AI umbrella. Personally, I'm interested in anything that's related to new tech and how it impacts the way that we make and share music. And audio in general. My background was looking at actually non-musical audio. My PhD was about podcasting specifically, so using new technologies for immersive and interactive audio. But because I'm a musician by background and trade, I'm kind of veering back this way now that I'm done with it. What I do want to say about the state and what we can do with AI nowadays in music, we can't emulate human creativity. That's a fact. That's not possible. We can't do it. It's not possible. What we can do is train large models on data sets. Data sets are just a group of information that we have at hand that we feed to some form of algorithm, and then the algorithm makes conclusions about the data set that you have and can replicate those conclusions to something else. So that can be helpful for analysis tasks. So if you have a large data set of archival audio, for instance, and you're after just finding the sounds where you have a baby crying in the street or something really specific like this, then you could train something to look for specific kinds of audio, and that's on the analytical side. Then you have generational tasks. Then I'm sure you've all come across those kind of prompt-based music generation tools. Like, I think one of them is Udio. There's a bunch of others that do this, where you put a prompt in and then you have just a piece of magical audio that comes out of nowhere. It actually comes out of a model being trained on a lot of data and then replicating connections basically between one node to the next. But this happening on a lot more dimension than just a melody. It's looking at all different facets of music at once. And then we have things to do with distribution. That can be more about adaptivity, so making sure that things follow specific routes and adapt well to how music and audio is transmitted. And that can be assisted with artificial intelligence as well. But those are basically the three main aspects of AI and audio that we can look at.
So when we were talking about this subject, we both know somebody in the industry, in the academic industry, that has been involved in training models. And basically what they did to train these models is they got in a whole bunch of engineers from around the music industry and sat them down and basically took data about what kind of movements they did with the faders, or if they added EQ at certain points, or things like that. And then they created a model based on this. And this is what we have in things like mastering software or auto mixing software. But the one thing that doesn't do is I've been recording a folk album lately, and we had the singer, is a very good singer, was giving a vocal take, and we had a very, very good vocal take come through, right? And to what I would suspect by an AI model, it would have been great, perfect, and everybody in the room thought it was perfect. But I said to her, I think it could be a little bit more, there's a little bit more there. And she went back and we discussed how to go about it. She says, okay, I'll do this and I'll do that. And then she did it again, and during the take, while she was doing the take, I literally was in tears, And this is what an AI cannot do. It cannot emulate that aspect of things. Do you use any AI when you are doing music?
So I will say sometimes, but I'm in the really specific context of being both an AI researcher and a musician. My musical practice, I'm a jazz musician primarily, do some pop things as well, but I'm a bassist and a singer, and I write a bunch of music. And because I have this training in how to use these models, I see them as ways that I can synthesize sounds in the same way that we use FM or subtractive synthesis, and all of these ways that I can integrate in my work to generate a larger palette of sounds. So that's the way in which I'm comfortable using these technologies, very much as a way to synthesize sounds. So the ways I've used it in the past was to feed a model that is open source, only trained on data of my own voice, to get a set of outputs that sounds a little bit like my voice, but not really, so that I could make some percussive vocal tracks to put at the back of a mix that needed some artifacts and noise in the background. But I'm using this in this super niche concept, right, of the researcher practitioner, where I can use those tools and those models because I was trained to run them, and I'm also a musician. It's a really niche thing that I don't think can be applicable to a lot of people out there. And oftentimes what I try to do when I talk about AI is my example of my use of AI is so niche that it can't be generalized to the public, because it comes with, well, a literal PhD, which you can't expect a musician to have when they're making music in the studio. So yeah, I don't recommend it. It's just what I found to be okay with my own practice.
Yeah, I do things like that too. I like to, I've always loved randomizing things and
like Markov chains.
Yeah, and seeing what happens when I do this thing, and I've always enjoyed that. So I have a couple statements here that I wanted to read to you. I'll read the two statements, and then you can tell me your thoughts afterwards. Okay, so on March 18th, the U.S. Federal Court of Appeals ruled that AI-generated music is public domain and impossible to copyright. And on March 25th, Anthropic won a case for using lyrics owned by the Universal Music Group. What are your thoughts on those two statements?
Well, I'll be interested to hear your thoughts afterwards as well. From just past experience, there's a few types of actors within the AI and music industry that is interesting to recognize. They're the kind of people and researchers and tech people who think that any data that's put online is fair game to use because it was made available to the public. So there's not even the beginning of a thought of copyright infringement because they genuinely believe that everything out there is up for grabs. Then there is the kind of usually researchers that fall in this category that basically think that a model that does not imitate but only learns from is okay, basically as long as the output is significantly different enough from the input, then that's fine. I don't agree with that personally, but that is a widely accepted notion within the AI music and AI and arts and creative tech generally industry. And then there are people who think that copyright should be enforced no matter what and no matter where the data comes from. So from these three different kind of state of mind, we get a bunch of different emergent legal cases and copyright issues that basically are these three types of thought. I'm obviously simplifying, there's a lot more opinions than that in the world, but you get a conflict between those three different aspects. So the first one where you were saying that AI output is open source would fall somewhere between the first two, and then the last one would be more on the side of everything is copyrighted. You can't just use whatever you want to train models. Personally, I fall I fall completely within the range of humans own what they make. If we're technically paying Spotify to listen to music, we shouldn't go into Spotify and music and how much they pay musicians, but still there is some form of streaming royalties that come from that. Models shouldn't just be able to access those and learn from them without an agreement and retribution to the artists. So there's a balance that has not been achieved and that needs a lot more reflections in our policy system and the rights attribution. All of this needs kind of an overhaul, and it's very slow to happen. So I don't have a lot of, sorry, this is not going to be an optimistic chat, I'm so sorry. I don't have many good news to share with you. The world is moving slowly on this, and all that we can do is keep up our knowledge and how we interact with things ourselves, and that's kind of all we have against those. How do you feel about these?
Well, I feel like I'm also in two minds about the whole thing. I don't want to listen to music that's solely generated by machines. I want to listen to human-created music. But the two things that come to mind, though, is one is if I use your voice and I use it to write a song and it has a specific political stance in mind about what I want to say, but it's completely against what you think, then I'm basically say that you're a huge artist, then I'm using your voice to say what I think, So I think it's wrong in that aspect. And I can imagine in this deep fake world, I've seen some things on YouTube and I thought, there's no way that person's saying that, but a lot of people aren't able to separate these things. But I'm also of the mind that I absolutely love rap music and hip hop and things like that, and those genres are built on using other people's music, but they're using it in a completely creative way that is different from what the original was. So I can't give you an answer.
Well, think an important thing as well when we're thinking about rap music and hip hop and any sample, even plunderphonics, if you think about like the ultimate pirate sample-based electronic music, it's not. There's surely more pirate-y genres of music, but even with that, there's the idea that if it isn't there isn't any royalties or retributions coming to the original artist, like oftentimes is the case with plunderphonics, then the material created is completely open source and available to everyone to consume. It's kind of a given. Whereas with rap, and if something is going through a major label, then there'll be an actual share going to the people who've made the sample at the beginning. So there are researchers out there, that's an optimistic thing. There are researchers out there that are thinking about remuneration streams and how to split up royalties in the case of uses of AI, and trying to come up with ways to share profit in these kind of cases of sampling, etc. But the research might be happening, but that doesn't mean the policy is following. I'm sure you're aware of that. Researchers might be saying something and be like, yeah, we have a solution. And then it's like 10 years later, there's a white paper published by the government like, 10 years ago, some researchers said something and we really thought about it. So yeah, that's some work is being done.
So that actually segues nicely to the next bit. So how can artists use AI responsibly without losing creative control?
Yeah, I've mentioned briefly how I use it in my own practice, but I think it's important to generalize it a little more. There is cost to anything that you're doing. If you're running a laptop to have your favorite DAW open, you're running a certain amount of electricity to generate this, you're running a certain amount of power, you're using people's time if you have an engineer with you, etc. For AI, all those costs go up dramatically. And those costs can be environmental in terms of like actual money, or they could be simply moral and ethical cost. What does your part in the AI machine and industry, and even my part when I'm talking about using AI sometimes in work that I do, in work that I know has been done in a reflected way because I've engaged with it as a researcher first and foremost. Even when I'm saying that about my music, I'm in some way or shape promoting the use of these technologies, which cannot always be used in that same kind of responsible way where everything is fine, because most time it isn't fine. So there is this kind of moral cost to take into account as well. And so whenever you're using a technologies, and I say this to students, I'm a professor of electronic music at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, aside from being a fellow here. And whenever I talk to my students about new technologies in music productions, I tell them to basically have a ground chat with themselves about what they're about to use, whether that's ChatGPT or automatic mixer. You'll have seen Isotope's new AI plugins that they're rolling out, or Waves or whatever. Have a chat with themselves about, are they okay with the cost for themselves and for the world? Is this query is asking ChatGPT, hey, what's the best way to cook lasagna worth this much water being spent? Is making a new sound this way worth the amount of time, effort, potential data infringement that you're using? If you know everything that's gone into your model, you can make those decisions a lot easier, which is why I advocate for self-reflected uses of AI, which means that before using any form of artificial intelligence branded tech, you ask yourself where the data is from, where the model is from, and is it open access? Is it something that's designed for profit or not? And who has control over the data and the output? And with those three questions, you can kind of narrow down on the actual repercussions of your uses of these technologies. And then after that, it's up to you and the answers of these questions and how you feel about it yourself, whether or not you engage with the technology. There's no right or wrong answer. Some composers are okay with having tech and AI compose arrangements for orchestras from one stem that they've put in. Some thinks that that's insane. That's up to you. The important thing is to go through these kind of like guardrails or fail-safes beforehand to have these this conversation with yourself about the technology you're using. Yeah.
So both of us are engineers, both of us are musicians. So is AI a threat to engineers, composers, and performers, or is it just a shift in tools?
I mean, you saw my face cringe a little bit. I have a dual response to this, and I suspect you might have too. So about 5 years ago, this is an anecdote time. About 5 years ago, I told my dad, who's also a musician, that there was no worries. He's fine. We're all fine. This is like, because 6 years ago, there were no, like, ChatGPT wasn't there yet. We didn't have this kind of, like, you can put in a prompt and music just happens. And the models I was working with at the time, let's be real, they kind of sucked. As in the output that he produced, nothing too real, etc. And he started working with this company that does backing tracks for karaoke's, etc. as a side gig. Everything went smoothly for a couple of years, and then they started firing a lot of musicians. And then they started firing the singers who were singing the songs, because what had they done? They had hired a singer and gave her £1,000 for forever rights on her voice to sing all the songs in their catalogue. So this is a very big karaoke company. I want to stress that this isn't like a niche. I'm French originally. This isn't a niche French fact. It is a worldwide sort of issue. And so I had this conversation again with my dad when that happened about 2 years ago, where we sat down and were like, oh, that was a mistake. It was a threat to at least some people's job, because that singer, I want to stress, £1,000 for forever rights for your voice is not enough. Like, it's insane the amount of work that this is anyways, it's not enough to me, at least. So that is definitely a concern. On the other hand, as engineers and as people who work in electronic music, electroacoustics, and all of these things, it can be used as a tool to enhance the work we already do. So there's a balance to have, which is again why I'm like, self-reflected users are fine in some cases. I don't know how you feel about
I think to a certain extent, they're using Morgan Freeman's voice now to replace him when he dies, which I think is sad, because that's taking away somebody's potential future job. But I can tell you that, our students spent all day yesterday setting up this event, and AI can't do that. AI can't physically plug in a lead anywhere or carry a piece of equipment yet, Maybe robots in the future, who knows, but, but at the moment, I think, for the most part, we're safe, but I don't think it's forever. I think that perhaps we'll find different jobs to do those, but maybe there will be a revolution at some point in which people say totally abandon any music that's been created using AI because they want to hear humans, So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Neither do I. Let's be perfectly honest. Neither of us know.
Okay, so, all right. If you were designing a code of conduct for AI in music, what would you include?
Oh, well, I think I briefly mentioned this earlier, that kind of the first step is to figure out how you feel about the technology you're using. So it starts with these questions about the actual technology you're using, about the data set it's trained on, about the model that you're using. The reason why I'm talking about the model and it being open source and whether that's important or not is because there's this trend of what I've been calling obscurantism of AI, which is just like the fact that the ability of the public to access information about the technology that they're using is slowly being removed from them and taken away from them. So why I stress that open access models and like transparent systems are important is because you need to have an understanding of the tool you're using before you can decide how you want to use it and in what capacity you're okay with using it. So you can look at any of the AI tools that you're using and either go to their about page, ethics page, or whatever, and you should hopefully find out some more about the code they're using. If you can't find out anything about it, then you can absolutely ask yourself some questions about who's made the model and what it was trained on, whether or not you'd be happy if the model was trained on data that you had unknowingly provided to them, because that might be the case. So yeah, all these questions are important, and like in my opinion, the first kind of step before you engage with those technologies. Then it's about the output and whether it's worth putting in the time, effort, energy, all of this into it. And finally, looking at the output, whether you, and how, let's back to the remuneration, and how is the output and the data you get from the output actually control? How is the money being distributed? Is it fair? Is it not fair? We're getting into like really ethical and moral realms here. There are no hard answers to any of these questions. I just want to stress that the code of conduct to me is to be inquisitive. And if you can have training somewhere about those kind of technologies while you're at university, or just by existing in the industry, please take the time to get a 2-hour seminar on how AIs work. It is great for you for the future to know how those function so that you can ask yourself these important questions.
So I think we're actually out of time, but I'm going to be cheeky and ask you one more thing. So is there anything that excites you about the future of AI in music?
Big pause. No, so there is actually things that I think can be really cool. Again, I've used AI as ways to generate sounds, and I find it quite wonderful that you can use. There's some particular generative models that look at replicating sounds, or timbral transfer, which is the process of taking someone's sound and timbre and applying it to something else. And there are so many applications that are very like morally conscious and small scale and human-centered, and those I'm very excited about. I'm also excited about ways that we can use AI to adapt to people's needs in terms of media, more specifically, making sure that whatever they're getting in their TVs or radios or whatever fits them specifically. And there are plenty of ways that we can use those kind of cleverer tools to get distribution to happen without a hitch anywhere. So that I'm quite excited about as well. But yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Jemily. So I wanted to open up to any questions. Are there any questions at this time? No? Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Jemily.